Her true story from Memphis, Tennessee. My daughter told me, Mama, Curtis's workshop has to go. Terrence needs that space for his office. She said it like she was telling me the weather, like she was explaining something I was too old to understand. That workshop was the last room in the house my husband ever touched, so I sold the whole house. And when my daughter pulled into the driveway on Thanksgiving morning with a trunk full of groceries and a plan to host dinner in my kitchen, there was a lockbox on the front door and a realtor's sign in the yard. But let me start from the beginning. The phone call came on a Sunday afternoon in March, while I was sitting on my back porch shelling butter beans into a tin bowl. It was one of those early spring days in Memphis, where the air can't decide if it wants to be warm or cold, so it just sits on your skin like a question. My daughter's name lit up the screen and I smiled before I answered, because that's what mothers do. We smile before we know what's coming. Hey, Mama. So listen, Terrence and I have been talking. Nothing good has ever followed those words. Not once in the history of the English language has "we been talking" led to something a mother wants to hear. The back room, Daddy's workshop, it's just sitting there collecting dust, and Terrence is working from home full-time now, and he really needs a proper office. We were thinking we'd clear it out this weekend, move some of the tools to the garage and maybe donate the rest. I set the bowl of butter beans on the step beside me. A few rolled off the edge and landed in the grass. I watched them fall. You there, Mama? I'm here. So is that okay? We'd do all the work. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. I looked across the yard at the workshop window. Curtis had installed it himself, a wide double pane so the morning light would come through while he worked. He built furniture in that room, rocking chairs mostly. He said there was something holy about making a chair that could hold a person while they rested. He made one for each grandchild before they were born. 4 rocking chairs, each one carved with their name and birth date on the back rail. He finished the last one 6 weeks before the stroke took him. The stain wasn't even dry. Jacqueline, that room stays the way it is. A pause. Then Terrence's voice in the background, muffled but sharp. Mama, it's just a room. The tools are rusting. Nobody's using it. I said no. Okay, fine. It was just an idea. She hung up before I could say goodbye. That was the first time, the first no that didn't land. My name is Alma Jean Whitfield. I'm 66 years old. I was born in a shotgun house on the south side of Memphis and raised by a woman who cleaned office buildings at night and pressed shirts at a dry cleaner during the day. My mother taught me 2 things that stuck. First, never let anyone rearrange your house while you're still living in it. Second, love is not the same as permission. I married Curtis Whitfield when I was 22. He was a carpenter by trade and a gentleman by nature, the kind of man who held doors open for strangers and remembered the names of every child on our street. We bought our house in 1986 for $54,000 with a VA loan and a prayer. A 3-bedroom brick ranch on Prescott Avenue with a magnolia tree in the front yard that bloomed every May like it was showing off. Curtis added the workshop himself, built it out from the back of the house over 2 summers, pouring the foundation on weekends and framing the walls after his day jobs. He ran the electrical himself, which I told him was going to kill us both. But the man knew what he was doing. He always did. We raised 2 children in that house. Jacqueline, our firstborn, who came into the world screaming and hasn't stopped having opinions since. And Nathan, our quiet one, who moved to Nashville after college and became a music teacher at a middle school. Nathan calls me every Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. You could set a clock by that boy. Curtis died 4 years ago. Massive stroke at the hardware store on a Saturday morning. He was buying wood glue. The clerk said he was laughing about something when it happened. That sounds right. Curtis was always laughing about something. After he died, people told me to sell the house. Too big for one person, they said. Too much upkeep. Too many memories. But the memories were the point. I wanted to wake up in the room where Curtis used to whistle while he got dressed. I wanted to drink my coffee in the kitchen where he'd burned a ring on the counter with a hot pan in 1994, and we'd covered it with a ceramic tile he painted himself, crooked sunflower and all. I wanted to walk past that workshop door and smell the sawdust and linseed oil that no amount of time could erase. So I stayed. I paid off the mortgage with Curtis's life insurance. I had my pension from 28 years as an administrative supervisor at the Shelby County School District. I had savings. I was comfortable. I was home. The trouble didn't come all at once. It crept in the way kudzu creeps, slow and green and almost pretty, until you realize it's swallowing everything. Jacqueline and Terrence lived in Collierville, about 30 minutes east. They had a nice house, new construction, the kind with tall ceilings and no character. Terrence worked in corporate logistics for a shipping company. He wore polo shirts with the company logo and talked about optimizing things. He optimized the garage. He optimized the kids' homework schedule. Now he wanted to optimize my house. After I said no about the workshop, I thought it was settled. But Terrence was the kind of man who heard no and translated it to not yet. By May, Jacqueline started dropping hints. Mama, the yard is looking rough. You need Terrence to come handle it? They came that Saturday and Terrence mowed the lawn, trimmed the hedges, and then walked through the house making notes on his phone. I watched him measure the hallway with a tape measure he'd brought from home. What are you measuring? I asked. Just curious about the square footage. These older homes, you never know what you're working with. I didn't say anything, but I saw Jacqueline glance at him from the kitchen, and something passed between them. A look, the kind married people share when they've already decided something and they're just waiting for the right moment to announce it. June came and went. The magnolia bloomed and dropped its petals across the yard like confetti at a parade nobody threw. I picked them up by hand because I liked the way they felt, thick and waxy and alive. Curtis used to press them in books. I found one between the pages of his Bible after he died, brown and papery thin, but still shaped like itself. I left it there. In July, Jacqueline called and asked if she could host Thanksgiving at my house. It's bigger than ours, Mama, and the kids love your backyard. We could do the whole thing. You wouldn't have to cook if you didn't want to. I said yes because it sounded nice. Family in the house again. Noise and plates, and the kind of controlled chaos that makes a home feel like a home. But then the requests started. Mama, can Terrence put a TV in the living room? For the football game? I didn't own a television in the living room. Curtis and I never wanted one in there. That room was for talking. Mama, Terrence thinks we should take out the rug in the hallway. It's a trip hazard. It was the rug Curtis brought back from a furniture expo in 1999, hand-woven, the only extravagant thing that man ever bought. Mama, the workshop door should stay closed during dinner. Terrence says the smell of sawdust bothers his allergies. Each request was small. Each one was reasonable on its own. But stacked together, they formed something else. A blueprint. They were renovating me out of my own house, one request at a time. Thanksgiving came. My house filled up with people. The grandchildren ran through the rooms the way children should, loud and careless and beautiful. Nathan drove down from Nashville and brought his guitar and a sweet potato casserole that was better than he'd admit. My neighbor Opal came by with a coconut cake because Opal has never shown up anywhere empty-handed in her life. But I noticed things. The rocking chairs Curtis made for the grandchildren had been moved from the porch to the garage. When I asked, Terrence said they needed the space for the folding tables. The photograph of Curtis and me at our 30th anniversary, the one that hung by the front door for 11 years, had been taken down and placed in a closet. Jacqueline said she was making room for coats. I went to the workshop after dinner. I closed the door behind me and stood in the dark and put my hands on Curtis's workbench. The wood was smooth from decades of use. I could feel the grooves where his tools had rested. I stood there until my breathing was steady and my eyes adjusted, and I could see the outline of the last rocking chair he ever made, still sitting in the corner with a drop cloth over it like a ghost that didn't know it was dead. I whispered into the dark, "They're rearranging us, Curtis." But I'm still here. December. Jacqueline and Terrence started coming over every weekend. They called it helping out. Terrence fixed a leaky faucet. Good. Terrence replaced the back door handle. Fine. Terrence installed a security camera on the front porch without asking me. Not fine. It's for your safety, Mama Alma, he said. He'd started calling me Mama Alma like he was writing himself into a family tree he hadn't earned. I asked him to take it down. He said he'd look into it and never did. In January, the letter arrived. It came in a white envelope, standard business size, addressed to me at my own home. Inside was a one-page document from an attorney named Philip Brennan. The letter proposed a voluntary co-ownership arrangement for the property at 44112 Prescott Avenue, transferring partial title to Jacqueline and Terrence Mitchell. The language was polite, legal, cold. It cited their substantial investment in maintenance and improvements and their intent to preserve the property for family use. Substantial investment. Terrence had replaced a faucet handle and mowed the lawn 6 times. I read the letter standing at the kitchen counter. Then I read it again, sitting down because my knees felt unreliable. Then I put it in the drawer beside the stove where I keep Curtis's pocket watch and a birthday card he wrote me the last year of his life. The card said, "Alma, you are the best thing I ever built. Not with my hands, with my whole life." I called Jacqueline that evening. I didn't mention the letter. I wanted to hear what she'd say without the prompt. "Hey, Mama, what's up?" "Nothing much. Just wanted to hear your voice. I was thinking about coming to your house this weekend. Bring some of that lemon pound cake the kids like." "Oh, this weekend's not great. Terrence's parents are visiting from Houston, and the house is going to be crazy. Maybe next week." "Sure, baby. Next week." Next week never came. It never does when someone is pulling away from you. The weeks just stack up like unopened mail until the distance becomes permanent and everyone pretends it was always that way. February. I drove to my house after a doctor's appointment and found Terrence's truck in the driveway. I hadn't told them I was coming. When I walked in through the back door, I heard noise from the workshop. Power tools. The high scream of a circular saw. I walked down the hallway, my heart beating in my throat. I opened the workshop door and saw Terrence standing in the middle of the room with a sledgehammer leaning against the wall and a section of the built-in shelving unit ripped out and stacked by the window. Curtis's shelves. The ones he built into the wall with dovetail joints and finished with 3 coats of polyurethane because he said if you're going to build something, build it to outlast you. "What are you doing?" My voice came out flat. Flat like a road. Flat like something that had been run over. Terrence turned around with the expression of a man who had been caught but not concerned. "Oh, hey, Mama Alma. Jackie said you were okay with us starting on the office conversion. These shelves were rotting anyway." "They were not rotting." "Well, they were dated. I'm putting in some modern floating shelves. It's going to look great." I looked at the pile of wood by the window. I recognized the grain. Cherry. Curtis had driven to a mill in Arkansas to buy that cherry. He'd let it season in the garage for a full year before he cut it. I knew because I'd complained about tripping over it every time I went to get laundry detergent. "Get out of this room." Terrence smiled. The kind of smile people give you when they think you're being emotional and they're being rational. "Mama Alma, let's not make this a thing. Jackie and I said get out." He left, slowly, like he was doing me a favor by leaving my own house. I called Jacqueline. She answered on the 4th ring with a sigh already loaded in her voice. "Mama, Terrence told me you got upset. He was just trying to help. He tore out your father's shells. They were old, Mama. They were your father's. Daddy's been gone 4 years. You can't keep that room like a shrine forever." I held the phone away from my ear and looked at it the way you look at something that has suddenly become unrecognizable. My daughter's voice was coming through the speaker, but the words belonged to someone else. To Terrence. To a man who measured my house and optimized my memories and called demolishing my husband's handiwork helping. "Jacqueline, listen to me very carefully. That workshop is not changing. This house is not changing. Nothing in this house moves unless I move it. Do you understand me?" Silence. Then, quietly, "You're being difficult." I hung up. That was March. A full year since the first phone call about the workshop. For 2 weeks nobody called. No visits. No texts. I watered my magnolia. I shelled butter beans. I sat in Curtis's workshop with the door open and the morning light coming through the double-pane window, and I let the silence teach me what I already knew, but didn't want to admit. My daughter and her husband didn't see me. They saw the house. They saw the property value. They saw an old woman sitting on an asset they wanted to inherit early. On the first Monday of April, I got dressed in my good navy dress, the one I wore to Curtis's memorial service, and I drove downtown. I walked into the office of my attorney, a woman named Sandra Ogletree, who had handled Curtis's estate and my retirement paperwork, and who always kept butterscotch candies in a dish on her desk. "Sandra, I want to sell my house." She didn't react the way most people would. She just looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Tell me why." So I told her. Everything. The phone calls, the letter from Terrence's attorney, the camera, the shelves, the locks, the slow, careful, methodical theft of my peace. She listened. Then she said, "Alma, that house is yours. Free and clear. No liens, no co-ownership, no legal exposure. They have no standing." I know they don't. That's not why I'm selling. Then why? I thought about it. I thought about the rocking chairs in the garage and the anniversary photo in the closet and the cherry wood stacked by the window like firewood. Because a house is supposed to be the place where people treat you right, and nobody's treating me right in that house anymore, not even the memories. The memories are getting crowded out, Sandra, and I'd rather sell the whole thing than watch what's left of Curtis get boxed up and donated by a man who calls me Mama Alma and doesn't mean it. She nodded. When? Before Thanksgiving. She smiled for the first time. That gives us 7 months. I only need 3. I listed the house in May. The Memphis market was strong. Prescott Avenue had gentrified around me over the years, old brick ranches selling to young families who wanted the neighborhood but planned to gut the insides. I priced it at $285,000. The lot alone was worth $140,000. A couple from Oregon made a full-price offer within 12 days. They were school teachers. They told me they planned to raise their children in the house and that they loved the magnolia tree. I shook their hands and signed the papers and didn't cry until I got to the car. The closing was June 28th. I did not tell Jacqueline. I spent the first week of July moving my things into a small apartment I'd rented on the east side of Midtown near Overton Park. 2 bedrooms. Clean. Quiet. The kind of place that doesn't try to be more than it is. I brought Curtis's pocket watch, the rocking chairs the new owners helped me load into a rented truck, the anniversary photograph, the drop cloth from the last rocking chair, and every tool I could carry from the workshop. I arranged the tools on a shelf in the second bedroom. It wasn't a workshop, but it smelled like one. And that was enough. The money from the sale sat in my savings account, $285,000 after closing costs and fees. I didn't touch it. I waited. I wanted to be sure. Jacqueline called on November 3rd, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. "Mama, we need to talk about Thanksgiving plans. Terrence and I figured we'd do it at your house again. The kids are already excited. Can we come by this weekend to start setting up?" I was sitting in my apartment drinking coffee from the mug Curtis gave me on our 25th anniversary. It had a picture of us on a Ferris wheel at the state fair, both of us laughing with our mouths wide open. The mug was chipped, but I'd never replace it. "You can't do Thanksgiving at the house, Jacqueline." "Why not? Mama, don't tell me you're still upset about the shelves. Terrence already apologized for that." He had not apologized. The house isn't mine anymore. Silence. The long kind. The kind that has its own weather. "What do you mean?" "I sold it. Back in June. A couple from Portland lives there now. They're very nice. They kept the magnolia." "You." "Mama, you sold the house." "Our house. My house. It was my house, Jacqueline. My name on the deed. My mortgage paid off. My husband's hands in every wall. Mine. You didn't even tell us. You didn't even ask." "Ask who?" "The daughter who sent me a lawyer's letter trying to take it. The son-in-law who ripped out your father's shelves while I was at the doctor. The people who put a camera on my porch without permission and told me not to come on weekends because it wasn't convenient. She was crying. I could hear it. The wet, ragged breathing of someone who has just realized they are standing in a consequence. Mama, how could you do this? I did it the same way I built that life, Jacqueline, with my own two hands. Your father and I bought that house in 1986. I paid it off with his insurance. I maintained it for 38 years. And when the people I loved most started treating it like it was already theirs, I made sure it wasn't anymore. Terrence's voice came through the background, sharp and metallic. This is insane. She can't just. She can, I said. She did. Mama, where are you living? Are you okay? I'm better than I've been in years. I've got a nice apartment near the park. I can hear the birds in the morning. I've got your father's tools and our photographs and a door that nobody walks through unless I invite them. What about Thanksgiving? What about it? Where will we go? I imagine you'll figure it out. You've been making plans without me for years. This should be easy. I didn't hang up first. I waited. I gave her the silence she had given me all those months. And when the line finally went dead, I set the phone on the counter and finished my coffee. The next day I called Nathan, my quiet son, the one who showed up without being asked and left without taking anything that wasn't his. Mama, I already heard. From Jacqueline? From Jacqueline's Facebook post. She wrote 3 paragraphs about being blindsided by family. Didn't mention the lawyer letter or the shells. No, I don't imagine she would. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Daddy would have done it sooner. I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deeper than your chest. The kind that surprises you because you forgot you could make that sound. Nathan, I want to do Thanksgiving. Okay, my place, no, somewhere else, somewhere none of us have been. Here's what I knew, somewhere none of us have been. Here's what I knew, $285,000 is a lot of money. It's more than my mother made in 20 years of cleaning offices. It's more than Curtis ever had in his account at one time. It's the kind of money that could sit in a bank and grow quietly, or it could be spent in a way that meant something. I had watched my house get eaten by entitlement. I would not let the money suffer the same. I started with the women I knew, not the ones you see at parties or church events, the ones you don't see, the ones who disappear into their own lives so completely that nobody notices when they stop showing up. Opal, 74. My next-door neighbor on Prescott Avenue for 19 years. She'd raised her grandson alone after her daughter died of an overdose in 2011. That boy was her whole world. He joined the Marines at 18 and called her twice a year. She still made his bed every Saturday morning in case he came home. He never did. Betty, 68. She worked the front desk at the Whitehaven Library for 31 years. She knew every child in the neighborhood by name and could recommend a book for any mood. Her husband had early onset Alzheimer's. She cared for him at home for 6 years until he passed in his sleep. She told me once, I spent so long being needed that I don't know how to be anything else. Francine, 72, retired school bus driver. Bad back, good laugh. She had 3 daughters who all moved to different states and sent group texts on Mother's Day, but never visited. Her apartment was clean and her refrigerator was always half empty, and she watched Jeopardy every night at 7 because it was the only voice in the room besides her own. Lenora, 70. She sang at funerals. That was what people knew her for. She had the kind of voice that made strangers cry and people who didn't believe in God reconsider. But nobody ever heard her sing at a birthday party or a wedding or a Sunday dinner because nobody invited her. She was the woman you called when someone died, and then you forgot about her until the next time. I called each of them. 4 phone calls on a Tuesday morning in November while the coffee was still hot and the courage was still high. I'm going to rent a house in Gatlinburg for Thanksgiving week. The mountains. A big cabin with a fireplace and the porch that looks out over the Smokies. I want you to come. My treat. All of it. 4 different reactions. Opal said, Girla, stop playing. Betty said nothing for 10 full seconds and then said, Why me? Francine said, I don't have anything to wear. Lenora said, Can I bring my good shoes? I booked the cabin 2 days later. 5 bedrooms, a stone fireplace you could stand inside, a kitchen with a farmhouse table long enough for all of us to sit together without anyone being tucked into a corner. I called ahead and asked them to stock the kitchen with everything I'd need for a full Thanksgiving dinner: turkey, cornbread, greens, sweet potatoes, Curtis's pecan pie. I packed the car with blankets, candles, a deck of cards, and the framed photograph of Curtis on the back porch of our old house, the one where he's holding a rocking chair above his head like a trophy, grinning so wide you can count his teeth. We drove up on a Monday. Opal rode shotgun and controlled the radio, which meant we listened to nothing but Motown for 4 hours. Betty sat behind me reading a paperback novel with her glasses on the tip of her nose. Francine fell asleep before we hit the interstate and snored softly the whole way like a cat in a sunbeam. Lenora sat by the window and hummed. When we pulled up to the cabin, Francine was the first out of the car. She stood in the gravel driveway and looked up at the mountains and the trees and the wide wooden porch, and she said, Lord have mercy, I forgot the world looked like this. That first night, we cooked together. 5 women in a kitchen that smelled like sage and butter and something older than all of us. We didn't follow recipes, we followed memory. Betty's cornbread, Francine's greens, Opal's macaroni and cheese, which she made with 4 kinds of cheese, and refused to tell anyone what the 4th one was. Lenora peeled sweet potatoes and told us about the first funeral she ever sang at, a man named Otis, who she'd never met, and how his widow grabbed her hand afterward and said, You sang him all the way home. I set Curtis's photograph on the mantel above the fireplace. Betty looked at it for a long time. He looks like a man who worked with his hands, she said. He was. He built things that lasted. So did you, she said. So did you. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up before the others. I made coffee and took it to the porch. The mountains were wrapped in fog, the kind that doesn't hide things so much as soften them, like the world was trying to be gentle. I sat in a rocking chair, one of the ones Curtis made. I'd brought 2 of them in the truck. They fit on that porch like they'd always been there. I thought about the house on Prescott Avenue. I thought about the magnolia tree and the butter beans and the ring on the kitchen counter from Curtis's hot pan. I thought about the new family living there now, the school teachers from Oregon, and I hoped they'd learn to love it the way we did. I thought about Jacqueline. I didn't think about her with anger, that was done. I thought about her with the particular sadness that comes from watching someone choose convenience over love, from watching your own child become a stranger wearing your daughter's face, from knowing that the distance between you wasn't caused by miles but by a man with a tape measure and a plan. One by one, the women came out to the porch. Opal with her coffee, Betty with a shawl, Francine in slippers, Lenora already humming. We sat in silence for a long time, 5 women watching the fog lift off the Smoky Mountains like a curtain opening on the last act of something beautiful. Opal spoke first. I haven't been this quiet and this happy at the same time in 30 years. Betty said, I didn't know I needed this until right now. Francine said, My daughters are going to be so jealous. And then she laughed, and it was the first time I'd heard her laugh without sadness underneath it. Lenora said, Can I sing something? Baby, you can sing anything you want. She stood up. She walked to the edge of the porch. She looked out at the mountains, and she opened her mouth and sang, His eye is on the sparrow, in a voice so clear and full and true that the birds in the trees went quiet, like they knew they'd been outsung. We all cried, not the hard kind, the easy kind, the kind that comes when something tight finally lets go. That night, after the turkey and the pie and the dishes and the laughter, we sat around the fireplace. I lit a candle beside Curtis's photograph. The flame trembled and then held. I want to do something, I said. I want each of us to say one thing we know now that we wish we'd known when we were young. Opal went first. I wish I'd known that giving everything away doesn't make people stay. Betty said, I wish I'd known that being tired doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've been carrying too much for too long. Francine said, I wish I'd known that being alone and being lonely are two different zip codes. Lenora said, I wish I'd known that my voice was worth hearing even when nobody was dying. They looked at me. I looked at Curtis's face in the photograph. That grin. That impossible, unreasonable, beautiful grin. I wish I'd known that the people who love you don't measure your house. They just walk through the door. We stayed the whole week. We hiked a trail that Francine said would kill her, and then she finished it first. We played spades until 2 in the morning and accused each other of cheating with absolutely no evidence. We took photographs on the porch, real ones, where someone else holds the camera and says, smile, and you don't have to try. Opal built a fire in the pit outside and burned a list she'd been carrying in her wallet, a list of every person who owed her something. She watched the paper curl and blacken and said, I'm done collecting debts nobody plans to pay. On the last morning, I found Lenora in the kitchen before dawn. She was sitting at the farmhouse table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, staring at nothing. You okay? I asked. I was just thinking. Nobody has ever taken me on a trip before. Not my mother, not my husband, not my husband. Or my church. I've been to 100 funerals and not one vacation. She looked up at me. How did you know I needed this? Because I needed it too. The email from Jacqueline came 2 weeks later. I was in my apartment making Curtis's pecan pie. Nathan was coming for Christmas and I was practicing because the crust had to be right. Curtis's recipe called for lard, not butter, and you had to work the dough with cold hands, which meant I ran mine under cold water for 30 seconds before I started. He taught me that. My phone buzzed on the counter. Subject, I miss you. Mama, I've been doing a lot of thinking since Thanksgiving. Terrence and I ended up going to his parents' place in Houston, and it wasn't the same. The kids kept asking why we weren't at Grandma's house. Terrence Jr. asked where Grandpa's rocking chair was. I know things got out of hand. Terrence admits the attorney letter was too aggressive, and I should have told him to leave the workshop alone. I see that now. But here's the thing. Terrence's company is downsizing, and we're not sure about his position. The kids' private school tuition is $22,000 a year, and we committed to it before things got uncertain. I was hoping maybe you could help us bridge the gap. Just $20,000 to get us through the spring semester. We'll pay you back. I know we've had our differences, but we're still family, Mama. I don't want money to come between us. Love, Jackie. I read it twice. Then I closed my phone and went back to the pie. She didn't apologize, she explained. She acknowledged the attorney letter was too aggressive, not wrong. She said things got out of hand, as if they were a kitchen fire and not a deliberate, months-long campaign to take my house while I was still breathing. And then, at the bottom, folded into the last paragraph like a receipt inside a sympathy card, she asked for money. $20,000. From the mother whose home she tried to claim. From the woman whose husband's workshop her husband demolished on a Tuesday afternoon. From the person who was told repeatedly that her presence was inconvenient. I thought about the cabin in Gatlinburg, about Opal burning her list, about Lenora singing to the mountains, about the candle burning steady beside Curtis's grin. Then I thought about this email, this familiar, small, predictable email, the kind that mistakes a mother's love for a line of credit with no interest and no limit. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Because if you have to explain to your own daughter why you won't fund the comfort of someone who measured your hallway and demolished your husband's shelves and called it helping, then the explanation isn't the problem. The listening is. I went back to my crust. I worked it with cold hands, the way Curtis taught me. The kitchen smelled like pecans and brown sugar, and something that might have been peace. I thought about the sage green door. No, that was someone else's story. I thought about my front door on Prescott Avenue. Brick red. Curtis painted it that color because he said red was the color of a heart, and a house should have a heart you could see from the street. I thought about Terrence installing a camera above it without asking. about Jacqueline walking through it like she owned it, about the new family opening it now, their children running through it the way children should, loud and free and belonging. Then I thought about a different door, the one at the cabin in Gatlinburg, the one Francine walked through and said, "Lord have mercy, I forgot the world looked like this." The one Lenora propped open so the mountain air could drift through, the one that was never locked, not once, not for a single second of that week. That's the difference between a house and a home. A house has people who measure the walls. A home has people who fill them. I finished the crust and pressed it into the pan. I poured the filling, Curtis's recipe, the one that asked for patience because you had to toast the pecans low and slow and not rush the caramel. I slid it into the oven and set the timer. Then I took 5 small mason jars from the cabinet. I filled each one with pecan praline brittle I'd made the day before from a recipe I invented myself, not Curtis's, mine, something new. I'd mail them tomorrow with a note tucked inside each lid, a single sentence. Not something Curtis used to say. Something I learned on my own, sitting on a porch in the mountains with 4 women who had been overlooked their whole lives and who turned out to be the most extraordinary people I'd ever known. The note said, "You were never too much. You were always enough." Because they were. Those women. Those quiet, sturdy, invisible, magnificent women. They were the home I didn't know I was looking for. Not a house on Prescott Avenue, not a cabin in the Smokies, not a daughter who only called when she needed something, just a table long enough for everyone, just a door that stayed open, just a candle burning steady beside the photograph of a man who built things that lasted, married to a woman who finally learned to do the same. If this story found you, if you have ever built something with your whole heart and watched it get measured and optimized and rearranged by people who didn't build a thing, if you have ever stood in your own home and felt like a guest, then you belong here. This is Grit Tales, where overlooked women become undeniable, where silence becomes a decision, where the love you spent on people who didn't earn it comes back to you through people who do. If you believe that kindness doesn't make you weak and being forgotten doesn't make you small, then subscribe today, because every woman deserves a door that stays open and a table where she sits at the head.